I have created an authorization server using OWIN middleware on ASP.NET Web API. So first let's see that this runs and that we get our token back after signing in. So the steps we want to take to make this authentication work throughout all of our microservices is override the token endpoint response and save this token and user ID and read that cache storage back from our microservices. So first we need a token store class to store our token and the user ID. And here we will probably use this in a different way using Redis cache for storage or something, but for this sample this should work fine. So I just need the properties for token and the user ID to run this sample. So the next step now is to override your token endpoint response so we can save that token. I'm just going to put a breakpoint here and then run the application, and we can step through it with this breakpoint. So I'm signing in, and it should hit the breakpoint, and it does. So now we know that this override works, and from our context here we can get our access token and we can get our claims, in this case the user ID, and we will flush that out to a file so we can grab that file with the user ID and the token in our microservices. Now if we jump into our file system, we will find the access token file we created when signing in, and you can see that we have our tokens and our user ID saved here. So let's start with the fun part now, and we want to create a controller in our first microservice, and we need that controller to get our token from the headers. And we need to compare those tokens with our storage token, sort of, to get the current user. So what we do here is just step through all of those breakpoints and just run this in multiple projects. So I'm gonna start this now, and let's see if it runs. And it should. Well, I have a bug. I just need to get rid of this. Oh, it's a reference here. So let's make this run, and then when we sign in now from our sort of authorization server, we will store the token. That's our first step. So both the token and the user ID. And once that is sort of saved to the, actually I think I have a breakpoint here, so yeah, this will flush this to the file, and then we need to grab the URL for the controller that we just created, and it should hit that breakpoint as well, and it does. So what happens here is that from our action context we will get our token, and we will read the file in this case and compare that token that is in the file with the header token, and if those match, we will then get our user ID, and that's what we want here. So next we will create a new microservice project, and we'll do that as an ASP.NET Web API project. And the reason is because you don't want to write this file function on each contract to get tokens and user ID and so on. So I will show you how you can wrap all of this into an Authorize attribute. So first of all, I will copy the token storage class from our first microservice project. And then secondly, I'll create, of course, a new controller for this project. And actually what I will do is copy the controller that we had in the first one, the get function, and just to see what we're actually removing here. And that's about everything. So now we need a couple of files here in this project. So first I'll have an authenticate file which will handle all the reading of our token storage. This would be convenient if you're using Redis cache or whatever. And you can of course change this to whatever you feel like. Definitely not a text file. So secondly, I will create a custom authorize attribute file, and this is inherited from the authorize attribute. So this is the file where we will get our token from the headers. And I'll just copy in some code here, and from what you can see, you're using the authenticate file, reading the tokens, and what you actually will need now is just check that this builds, and you're good to go. So now you need to add the attribute to the functions that you want to authorize, and I'll put a breakpoint here and run the application just to prove that this actually works. So give me a second here. So I'll sign in, get the token, and I'll paste in this URL, API test get, and it actually hits our breakpoint. So just declaring that attribute will handle everything for you, and everything else will work exactly the same way.